6 months. That's how long it's been since I last heard his voice. Not a call, not a text, not even the faint trace of his presence in the places we used to share. I told him once that he over-sexualized me, thinking I was defending myself, protecting something sacred. But now, in the silence he left behind, I wonder if I was wrong. I thought I was setting a boundary. Instead, I built a wall so high that I can no longer climb it. And behind it, I lost someone I never imagined living without. When I first met Daniel, everything about him felt disarming. His laugh had this reckless joy to it, like he wasn't afraid to be vulnerable. We met at a book signing, me awkwardly clutching a worn-out copy of my favorite novel, and him in line just ahead, casually joking about how no author could ever live up to the expectations their readers placed on them. That moment, so brief, so ordinary, became the spark for something I thought would last forever. At the time, I was a recent college graduate, still drifting between ideas of who I wanted to be. My world was uncertain, fragile, and messy. He was steady, older by a few years, already working as a journalist. He knew who he was, or at least he convinced everyone he did. That confidence drew me in. The early days of our relationship were the kind you almost don't believe when you look back. Coffee shops that turned into hours of conversation, long walks in the rain that felt cinematic, and the kind of effortless chemistry that makes you believe in fate. I felt seen, valued, and most of all cherished. But even then, there were shadows at the edges. Daniel had a way of expressing affection that leaned heavily into physicality. Not in a way that was disrespectful or aggressive, never that, but in a way that sometimes made me feel like my worth was tied to my body. Compliments about how I looked outnumbered the ones about who I was. His touch lingered longer than his words. At first, I ignored it, telling myself it was just passion, just love expressed differently. But in the quiet spaces, doubt began to grow. Friends would tease me, "He can't take his eyes off you." And while they meant it as flattery, part of me wondered if maybe they were right in ways they didn't intend. Maybe he really couldn't. Maybe he didn't see the parts of me that craved recognition beyond the surface. Still, I stayed, because love, in its early stages, often asks us to overlook things we might later regret. And I did, for years, until one evening, everything cracked. It was an ordinary night, or at least it began that way. We were at his apartment, takeout containers scattered across the coffee table, the glow of the TV flickering in the background. He had just gotten home from a long day, his shirt untucked, his hair slightly out of place. I was telling him about my new project at work, the kind of thing I had been pouring myself into for weeks. I wanted him to see me, the ambition, the late nights, the effort. But as I spoke, I noticed his eyes drift. Not to my words, not to the ideas I was so proud of. To me, to my body, to the dress I wore that night. It wasn't malicious. It wasn't overt, but it was enough. Enough to shatter something fragile inside me. My voice faltered, and in a moment of raw frustration, I said it. "You over-sexualize me. That's all you ever see." The words hung in the air like a curse. His face shifted, hurt, disbelief, anger, all flashing at once. He didn't yell. He didn't defend himself. He just went quiet. At first, I thought the silence was temporary. A pause before an apology. A moment of reflection before he'd come back and reassure me. But the hours stretched into days, the days into weeks. His calls stopped. His texts became fewer, then none at all. I reached out, at first with pride, then with desperation. But the replies never came. Friends told me I had done the right thing, that I had spoken my truth, that if he couldn't handle it, maybe he wasn't the right person for me. But what they didn't see were the nights I lay awake replaying every moment, every word, wondering if I had mistaken devotion for objectification, wondering if I had driven him away not because he failed to value me, but because I failed to understand the way he showed love. The silence became louder than any argument could have been. It filled the spaces we once shared, our favorite restaurant, the park where we spent Sunday afternoons, even the coffee shop where we first met. Everywhere I went, I felt his absence like a shadow, and in that shadow regret grew. 6 months passed before I saw him again. It wasn't planned. I was walking downtown, arms full of groceries, when I spotted him across the street. He looked the same, yet different. His shoulders were heavier, his expression guarded. For a moment, I thought about turning away, pretending I hadn't seen him, but something in me couldn't let go. I crossed the street, each step heavy, my heart pounding in my chest. When I said his name, he turned, and for a fleeting second, I saw the man I had once loved. The warmth in his eyes, the familiarity of his smile. But it vanished quickly, replaced by a distance that felt colder than the months of silence. I wanted to apologize, to explain, to tell him that maybe I had been wrong, that maybe I had spoken out of fear more than truth. But as I opened my mouth, he shook his head. Just once. There was no anger in his expression, only finality. Like he had already made peace with the loss. Like he had already buried what we had. And in that moment, I realized the depth of what I had done. Not because I had spoken my truth, because truth should be spoken, but because I had spoken it without listening, without understanding, without allowing space for the love he had tried, in his imperfect way, to give me. I watched him walk away that day, carrying not just his silence, but my regret. And I knew then that some betrayals don't come from others. Some come from ourselves, from the walls we build, from the accusations we hurl, from the inability to see love even when it's staring right at us. It has been months since that final encounter, and I still replay it in my mind. The sound of his footsteps fading. The way his eyes looked at me as though I was a stranger. The silence that followed, stretching endlessly into the spaces of my life. I told myself I had done the right thing, that I had defended my worth. But worth isn't always diminished by love expressed differently. Sometimes it's elevated. Sometimes devotion looks like an embrace instead of a word, a lingering touch instead of a compliment about your mind. And sometimes, in the rush to protect ourselves, we destroy the very thing we needed most. Betrayal takes many forms. We often think of it as someone hurting us, lying to us, or leaving us. But what happens when the betrayal is ours? When we betray love itself because we cannot see past our own fears. I lost him not because he failed me, but because I failed to see him. And now, the silence he left behind has become my greatest teacher. So I leave you with this. How many walls have you built in the name of self-protection, only to find yourself standing alone behind them? And when the silence comes, as it always does, will you be able to live with it?